Hi everybody, my name is Dominique Davis. I also go by Dom, and I'm going to be talking to you all today and give you guys an overview of the DSM-5 criteria for gender dysphoria. First of all, let's just go over a general overview. In the DSM-5, gender dysphoria has age-appropriate distinctions from children, adolescents, and adults. The diagnosis differs based on age, and because gender is objective and constantly ever-evolving, the DSM-5 tries to keep up with that. For the context of our conversation and presentation today, as far as the DSM-5 is concerned, when sex or sexual is referred to, it's considered the biological indicators such as male, female, and sexual reproduction. That can include sex chromosomes, gonads, reproductive organs, sex hormones, non-ambiguous internal and external genitalia as well. Let's also note here that this differs from disorders that are related to sexual development. For sexual development, that means that there must be some inborn somatic deviations from either the reproductive tract or the biological indicators of male or female. A more in-depth consideration of gender arose when individuals that are born with ambiguous biological indicators, such as someone who would be considered intersex, their gender identity or expression doesn't necessarily align with what their biological features may suggest or identify. Gender is also a construct that is not only socially recognized but legally recognized, especially when it comes to how someone chooses to live their lives, either as boy, girl, man, woman, male, female. This is just some general terminology just to help keep up with the terminology associated with gender dysphoria. One is gender assignment, also can be known as the natal gender, or more common in the sexual health or psychology community, sex assigned at birth. So that means you were born male, born female. Then there's gender atypical, which refers to someone who might be presenting somatic features or behaviors that are not typical with their assigned gender or the gender that they were assigned at birth. This can also be a way to describe someone who's gender nonconforming. Then there's gender reassignment, the process of official and social recognition as someone changing their gender to something other than their natal gender. Gender identity is their social identity. It refers to how someone identifies as male or female, or something alternate from male or female, just not what they were assigned at birth. Gender dysphoria is the overall feeling of someone who's discontent with their sex assigned at birth or their natal gender. Transgender is a broad spectrum of individuals who have taken the steps to either transiently or persistently identify as the opposite gender than the one that they were assigned at birth. So it's a spectrum because some people just want the appearance, some people want everything down to the somatic or genetic features. It really is a spectrum of what makes people comfortable to identify as transgender. Then we have transsexual, an individual who is seeking, already undergone the social transformation from male to female or female to male. This can include gender reassignment. So let's start off with how gender dysphoria is identified in children. It is just marked by a child having issues with their sex assigned at birth, their experienced gender or expressed gender. Let me start over. It starts with someone who is a child who is expressing themselves, or their lived experience in a gender does not match with their sex assigned at birth. And to continue the criteria, it must be at least 6 of the following, but it has to include the first one. The first one is the child shows a strong desire or insistence of them becoming or being the opposite gender. So whenever a child is being diagnosed with gender dysphoria, that has to be included of at least of the 6 of the ones I'm going to go over. And a child assigned male at birth, they have a strong preference for cross-dressing, simulating female attire. For someone assigned female at birth, it is someone with a strong preference for masculine clothing and a strong resistance to wearing feminine attire. The child also would prefer to play with opposite gender roles and make-believe and fantasy play. The child has a strong preference for toys, games, or even activities that are typically associated with or used by the opposite gender. They also have a strong preference of playmates that are the opposite gender. There is also a strong rejection that the child has for any toys, games, or activities that are associated with their sex assigned at birth. They also might show a strong dislike for their sexual anatomy, so not being a fan of their vagina, not being a fan of their penis, things like that. The child also has a strong desire to have primary or secondary characteristics that match one's experienced gender. So that could be like makeup, or looking more feminine, or not having a penis or a vagina. The condition also has to show that the child has a strong clinical distress or impairment in social, school, or any other setting due to this discomfort and discrepancy about how they feel about their gender. So moving on, adolescents and adults are profiled similarly and diagnosed similarly. So it starts off with, similar to with children, a marked discrepancy of their experienced gender or lived gender and their sex assigned at birth. And that has to continue for 6 months or more. And then for them to be considered, for an adolescent or adult to be considered having gender dysphoria, it has to contain two of the following. First being a marked discrepancy between their expressed or experienced gender and their primary or secondary sex characteristics. In an adolescence, it would mostly be them being very upset about the anticipation of secondary sexual characteristics, such as puberty, things associated with puberty, growing breasts, growing more hairy in places that they're not a fan of, becoming more muscular, taller, voice deepening, things of that nature. Then there would be also a strong desire to change the primary or secondary characteristics because of this inconsistency with how they feel they're expressing their gender. And then for an adolescent, it would just be them wanting to stop that process. So you hear a lot about hormone blockers and things like that, with parents making or helping their children make those kinds of decisions. Because an adolescent would be terrified of their voice deepening or developing breasts if they feel that they might have gender dysphoria. And then there's a strong desire to have opposite sex characteristics than the ones that they have at birth. A strong desire for them to be the opposite gender, different from their natal gender. So 3 and 4 are similar. 3 is more so the physical characteristics that we assign with male, female, and then 4 is more their desire to identify as the opposite gender than what they were. Just to be clear, because I know they seem similar. And then to continue, there is also a strong desire to be treated as the other gender. So not only do they see, feel, and express themselves as the other gender, they want to be treated as if they are the opposite gender. And it can even be anything alternative. It doesn't just have to be male, female. There's also non-binary as well. And then there's a strong conviction that they have typical feelings and reactions that would be typical of the opposite expression to what they are assigned at birth, or any other gender than what they were assigned at birth. Then the condition is associated with clinically significant distress and impairment for social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning.